And we're back. Okay, we are back on female reproductive structures. Okay, here we go. Uterus, let's do it. All right, so the uterus, what are we talking about here? We are talking about this, the goat, right there. There we go. All right, so it does like go down, but I'm going to make it fairly neat and just like be like, there we go. All right, so if you look at like the skull of a cow or a goat or something like that, it looks just like this. That's why I call it the goat. It looks like a goat. All right, the uterus, this whole mess in here is your uterus. Your uterus is about the size of a fist. Okay? So ladies, if you hold up your fist, that's about the size of your uterus. Gentlemen, for the most part, the uterus is a little bit smaller than your fist, but not by much. Okay? So about the size of a fist. Now, a baby has to grow in there, and it is normally the size of a fist. So what the what? So this thing can expand. So in its natural state, it's this big, but it will expand to the size of a basketball. And in cases where people are having multiple babies at the same time, it can expand to the size of a small beach ball. A beach ball! What? This thing is this big! This big. So, anyway, this is episode 2 of Go Hug Your Mothers. All right. So, in its natural state, it's the size of your fist, and it can expand to the size of a basketball or a small beach ball when you are pregnant. If you think about that in your organs, it basically pushes the rest of your digestive organs out of the way and is like, hey, we're going to make room. You need to leave. And so that's why pregnant women have so many issues with digestion and indigestion and breathing and overall pains, is because this thing just is like, move, and there it goes. Okay. So the uterus, what is it good for? Everything. All right. So the uterus is really important. It's the most important part of the whole mess because it's the baby house. It is the crib before you were ever put in a crib. So the uterus is a sole reproductive structure. Now, yes, when we get to the episode on hormones and blah, 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 okay. But for today's episode, you need to understand that this is just for baby housing. So the deal is what's up with menstruation and blah, 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 and growing a baby? Well, everything has to happen here. Now, first off, you have to attach to the uterine wall. So I think I've got, oh, it's a big chubby baby. People, I'm just saying, like, look at that. Just look at how big these babies are. In this example, it looks like a C-section because it's above the pubic bone there and not down here. So no, they don't just like cut this giant piece of your stomach off in a C-section. They make an incision about right here. It's above your pubic bone. It's about right here. And it's about 4 to 5 inches across, I think. 4 to 5 inches across, and they just go with a surgical blade and just and they can't like just go super deep because they don't want to damage the baby or anything like that. So they go right above your pubic bone, 4 to 5 inches across, and then they put these giant metal, see these things right there? They're these things that literally like the claws, and they make an opening. Whoop! And that is big enough for the doctor to get his hands in there and physically pull the baby out of your body. Some of you know me and know that I had a C-section with my son, and so I know this procedure very, very well. You're awake the whole time. That's something a lot of people don't understand. This mom is not knocked out. She is given pain medication, but you are fully awake. And they put a curtain about right here so that you can't see what's going on. I begged them. I begged them to make the curtain go away so I could watch this whole thing because I'm such a weirdo. But they were like, no, you don't want to see your intestines be pulled out of your body and sat on a table next to you so that we can access your baby. And I was like, but don't die, but don't die. So anyway, my doctor refers to this as delivering out the sunroof. So, yep, they make a little 4 to 5 inch incision. They have these giant metal claws that just like hold it open, and then they got to tug this kid out of there. Now, something that you're not seeing are all the other organs that are in the way and the rib cage that is in the way. Random anecdote, my son and his poor little butt was stuck inside my rib cage, which sounds absolutely awful, but whatever. So every time they would try to tug him out of my rib cage, they would bash his head on my hip bone, like my actual hip bone. And so he came out and he had little swollen and like bruised places. He looked like he had done battle. Poor guy. And I was like, oh no. And then later it felt like they broke my ribs, but they didn't. Um, so anyway, it was so sad. He had all these little bruises from being stuck everywhere. If you've looked at the average female torso lately, people, there's not that much room. There's just not. My kid was not huge. He weighed 7 pounds and 15 ounces. That's, I mean, 100% average size baby. His head was in like the 50th percentile. That's as average as you can get. Um, so I mean, he was just like absolutely middle of the road. My sister had a 9-pound baby. It was like, good grief, where did you put him? So it's just they have to get like up in those rib cages because they're just so big. So literally your whole torso is just baby. It's the craziest thing. Having a kid is the craziest thing in the world. Okay, so let's talk about this uterus again. All right. So the uterine wall, see there? It's on the inside. And it's the part that sheds. It's also the part that contracts. So when you hear about contractions and you're like, I have a contraction, and you're like, I don't know what that means, but that seems awful. What that means is that these muscles are squeezing down because they are literally trying to squeeze the kid out of you. They're trying to squeeze an 8-pound bowling ball out of you. So these contractions are going to be strong. Yeah. Luckily, C-section people, we don't have to deal with contractions, so yay for me. But it seems awful. I've talked to my friends. It seems real bad. So these scale, and as contractions progress, your cervix opens wider and wider and wider. And so eventually, when you get to the strongest contractions you have, which are enough to make people vomit and cry and poop yourself, that will happen. That's something a lot of people don't tell you about. You will poop yourself during contractions. There is so much pressure. There are so many muscles that are all squeezing your entire abdomen and your uterus down, that it's enough to get that baby out of your body, but it still takes hours and hours. Some of your mothers were in labor for 2 or 3 days. Days of contractions. Days. Go hug your mother. So anyway, the uterine wall. The uterine wall is strong. After you have a kid, your uterus is still the size of a basketball, and it has to get to the size of a fist. So your uterus will contract even if you've had a C-section to shrink it back. They will also come in and do what's called a uterine massage. Man, that sounds really nice, doesn't it? Massage? I would rather like get hit by a truck. It's this sweet nurse, and the sweet nurse comes in and she basically just like punches you in the uterus repeatedly, in hopes of getting your uterus to respond. And I was on pain meds and still had to tell her to stop because I couldn't breathe. So it's a painful experience. Why do we have kids again? Why? All right, endometrium. Okay, so your endometrium is the lining of the uterus. Do you see it? Do you see the lining? It's what sheds. You want to talk about what sheds? That's what sheds. Where does all the blood come from? It comes from your endometrium. Yeah. So your endometrium is a bit like a toddler that is having a tantrum. Every month, it grows thick blood vessel filled tissue. It's like it prepares a nursery for you. It wants you to have a baby. It's begging you to have a baby. And you're like, I got other goals, man. So every month, it prepares a nursery for this baby, right? So think of it like it hangs decorations on the wall. It assembles a crib. It takes hours and hours to just make the perfect space for your baby to grow. And then what do? You don't get pregnant, right? And so it throws a fit and it starts ripping the wallpaper off the walls and tossing the decorations and just overall thrashing. And it is mad. Oh, it's mad. And so it literally tears itself off the uterus. Not kidding. Shreds. So it tears itself off the uterus. Your uterus will contract and like literally like grind its tissue off. And then it sheds, and that's where all the blood comes from. You can see why this is a painful process. You can see why this is a bloody process. It's literally part of your body being like, like clawing at itself. And it's like, why do you not love my baby nursery? And then you're like, dude, I can't just be doing this baby thing all the time. And then it doesn't understand. It doesn't understand. All right, so I'm going to pause here and pick back up with ovaries.